Welcome to another reading wrap up. Before I start the reading wrap up for January, though, I'm making a few tweaks to this channel. I've started to get overwhelmed with reading because what I've done without realizing I've done it is each month I've now set myself a task to read 3 books specifically for this channel. For example, the book club, the reading vlog, and Claire and the classics. So what's happening now is I'm trying to rush through books and I'm looking at my calendar and I'm like, oh, content, and it's really overwhelming me. And what I'm what I'm finding is the book club, there's no interest in it. If there is, it's not in the comments, and I'm not getting emails from people sharing their thoughts of a book. So it's a book club that's not getting interest. And therefore, I'm there working my bit hardest to get the book club book done. Because when you're reading for a book club to come on do a video about it, you've got to really remember it and really take it in. Then you've got to read another book from another, and it's just getting too much when you're not getting any real feedback over it. So I'm going to shelve the book club for now. If this channel starts to grow with bookish people that actually want to join the book club and put pieces in and comment in the comment section, fair enough. But if not, it is what it is. Because I don't want this channel to become like a work channel. Because reading's my hobby, it's my downtime. The reading vlog is the same thing. It's become a challenge. And the last one got very few views. And it's a lot of work to do it throughout 2 or 3 days where you're reading a bit, commenting, reading a bit. Then Gary's got to stitch it all together and do all that kind of stuff for it not really to come to anything. So there's another way I could do that. Well, I'll come back to that in a minute. And Claire and the Classics is not going to be every month. It may be if I take the pressure off, but it's going to be as and when I read one. The rest of the content will just be reading wrap ups, any book hauls that I get, or when I read a book and I think I'm going to go on there and I'm going to share this book because I really enjoyed it and take it from there because I don't want to overwhelm myself. In relation to reading vlogs, because I know one of you said you were looking forward to the James Herriot book, what I could do with that is if I read one and it's a really good book, and I think that one will be, is I can come on and do a video on it, a 20-minute video where I talk about that. It just takes the pressure off because it's not nice when your hobby becomes pressure, okay? So that's what's going to be happening on this channel. And one of you mentioned as well possibly doing reading sprints on here where I go live on here and we read together. So that's something we could do. Bear that in mind. So yeah, because I'm looking at other people's booktube channels that don't put the pressure on themselves that I have each month, and it's like that's what it should be. It shouldn't be having to do this, sorry, itchy nose, having to do this video, having to do that video, having to do and yeah, and getting nowhere for it really. So let's get in with it. Let's get to it. My words today are shocking. First book I read in January 2025, and the first book I read this year was this one, Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. It's the first time I've ever read this, and I absolutely loved it. It's a chunky one. It covers the American Civil War. I'm sorry for the light reflecting on it. It covers the American Civil War. It covers the rich. It covers the rich slave traders. It covers how it's a coming of age story about Scarlett O'Hara, who I think I said this in the actual Claire and the Classics video that I did. I think she's about 15 or 16 when it starts. And I think she's 16 when she meets Rhett Butler, and he's like in his 30s, and you're like, cringe. You, it's a book of its time. Let's put it that way. Um, it stays with you. It stays with you. And what I found was, ever since I read it at the beginning of this month, it was end of December, beginning of January. It stayed with me. There's insights, new insights come, and I got to a stage where the other day, and I was thought, do you know what? Rhett Butler is a downright abuser in this, because she's only young, and at the one time where she actually says to him, "I want you," and I actually realise now that I do love you and need you. He goes, he leaves her, and it was that, and it was like, oh my God. Um, fantastic book. And I loved the, and it, I actually wouldn't have understood about the American Civil War if it hadn't have been for this book. Um, I just wouldn't have understood about it. I was never taught about it at school. We were too busy being taught about the Tudors, etc. Um, it's a coming of age book. It's about her hopes and dreams, and she's spoilt, she's precocious, she's Scarlett O'Hara, and the Civil War comes and takes away the parties, the fancy dresses, the big house, the slaves, the money, all of it, and it's about her having to come back after that, about her love and infatuation for someone that where her feelings are misguided. And there's also that's not Rhett Butler's in the background, but then he comes closer and closer in as the book goes forward. But yeah, it's an absolute belt. I know people say it's problematic. I think we have to be cautious of what we say is problematic nowadays because it's important we learn about these things. And by saying it's problematic and we shouldn't read it, we don't learn from it. We don't learn about the racism. Some of us haven't grown up aware of this type of stuff. Some people have, but I haven't. And I wouldn't have learned about it if it hadn't been for this book. Because as I was learning about it in this book, I went and I Googled it. And it's made me more aware and more aware of our current times now and the precarious times that we are in. So it is a book of its time. I will warn you of that, but I think, we should bear that in mind when we're reading a book. Anyway, the second book I read in January was called Traitor's Gate by Jeffrey Archer. And this was a gift from one of you quite some time ago, actually. And I didn't realize, and I don't know if you realized it, but well, at the time you gave me, it was the last one of a series. It was the last one of a series because I started to read it, and I was like, there's no character building here. I thought, is this a series? And I was like, no, not a game. So I went on to Fantastic Fiction and it is a series. You can read this out of the series, but you're following a detective called William Warwick. So the characters have already been built, so you'll be thrown into the characters. So that does have an impact on the story, but that's not the author's fault. That's my fault for reading it out of sync. But I read it. It's about, 24 hours to stop the crime of the century, which is the stealing of the crown jewels. Now, William Warwick in this has worked his way up to become a Royal Protection Officer. So they're responsible for what's it called, the opening of Parliament and the Crown, the Orb, the Spectre, and delivering them across London and back to the Tower. And he's got his arch nemesis in this. And from what I see, the arch nemesis seems to be in all of them that wants to bring William Warwick down. So he sets up a robbery of the Tower of London, of the Crown, because he knows that it's going to, destroy his career. It's very easy. It's very quick. I mean, you can buzz through this in a day or even 2 days. It's a nice palate cleanser without it being too much of a palate cleanser. I will say though, what I've found because I've actually then since read the first one, for me, you find they don't really stick with you. They're good while you're in them, but then they don't really stick with you. You kind of lose the plot. Well, I lose the plot anyway. But yeah, I really recommend that. It was interesting. I recommend Gone with the Wind as well. So, and then as part of our book club the book we read for that was The Mother by Valerie. I think when I did this, I said Riley Keough. It wasn't that. That's Lisa Marie's daughter. It's Valerie Keough. Anyway, names in me. I really enjoyed this. I busted it in a day. I went straight through it. I have never read a book in a day. It's taken me till the age of 42 to read a book in a day, and I've done it, and I loved it. It's about a woman she's a doctor. She's married to her husband, Nick. On the surface, the marriage looks perfect, but there is layer upon layer upon layer of stuff going on in the relationship, the people around her, her own mental health, her own attitude to life. She will do things I mean, what's her name? Sarah. Sarah does things in this book that you will cringe at. She's not, she's her worst enemy. She sabotages her life something chronic. But as the book develops, you realize that she's realizing that and how she turns it around. For example, her husband Nick wants to have a baby and she doesn't love him. He's really clingy. There's another side to him. You're not sure what it is, but you can feel it a brewing. And she decides to fall pregnant on, she takes her last pill or something. Oh, you know what she does, but she throws the pill packet in the bin and she says, if it goes in the bin, that means she stops taking them. If it comes out of the bin, she carries on. I know it's not a correct way to decide whether you're going to have a baby, but it's a book. It's a story, it's a bit of fiction. And it was like, whoa. And then also, obviously, that the pills go in the bin. So she stops taking the pill and she falls pregnant. But because she's not happy, she's not in a stable relationship, postnatal depression, not liking being a mother, all kinds of crazy stuff starts happening. The baby goes missing. Who's taken the baby? Why? For such a little book, there's a lot to process, but it's it's a quick read. It doesn't take long at all. My next read was this one called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Hatt or Haidt. I don't know. I read this for the reading vlog. I really, really enjoyed this, but some parts of it I struggled with. For example, the bits about letting your children just go out to play when they're like 8 year old or even younger at some parts of this book. And he says, the world isn't as scary as people make out. Mm, I don't know. I understand so much of what he says in this book. The need for play, the need for the woods, the need for more responsibility, children to have more responsibility, for them not to be so cushioned, for them not to just be growing up in this online world. But if I had a little child, would I want them to go out and play at 6, 7, 8 years old? If you lived in a place like he actually, to be fair to him, he talks about the olden days where kids went into the street and mums watched them and mums took it in turns. I tell you what, Sylvia, I'll watch them. You get on with your washing, that type of energy. We don't have that now. If your child goes out into the street, there's nothing. There's people haven't got that community anymore. But then at the same time, it also makes them responsible for them. So there's arguments for and against. It's kind of scary what the online world is doing to children and teenagers and how it's infiltrating our thought patterns, how it's infiltrating everything we do think and not for the good. This is something I'm working through at the minute with myself. He was actually going to start writing this book in relation to what's happening with the US and the election and how social media has boofed that election in the way it has, but then realised that there is an even bigger problem, although now it is a very big problem, that election. But the bigger problem at the time was the fact that children were so hijacked with social media. But I'm also of the mindset that we shouldn't really be weaponizing and demonizing things. I feel the answer for me is teaching your children how to navigate it safely, how to spend time on it safely, how to spend the appropriate amount of time on it. I'm all about balance. We live in a world that is tech based. Let's not demonize tech because tech can be of help. For someone that can't hold a book in their hand due to arthritis, holding a light Kindle, you know what I mean? For someone that's isolated and lonely, being able to take part in a live on TikTok where they're crafting, which is a thing I've just discovered, where somebody will come on and craft and they'll go live, they'll have the camera down on them, they'll be chatting away, they'll have a cup of tea. Other crafters will come on, people that are lonely with mental health, all loads of, it's actually a big thing. And I think it's amazing because not everyone can get out of their house. We live in the real world. So it's about being able to see the positives and how to navigate it. Anyway, the final book, I've got it written down because it's not an actual physical book. Well, it is, but I read the library version of it on the e-library. Is it the Libby app? Um, was the first book in the William Warwick series, which we're working out, me and Gary are now working our way through that series of books. And the first one is called Nothing Ventured, and there'll either be a picture there. There'll probably be a picture there. Yes. Nothing Ventured by Jeffrey Archer. And it's the first book in the William Warwick series where you're introduced to all the characters. William Warwick comes in, I think it's the 70s. So it's a great one if you're in that generation when you were a young un in the 70s and 80s or started your career. Obviously, Jeffrey Archer is an older man, so he really does that well. William Warwick starts off as a young toff. His dad's like a QC or a big barrister, and he decides he's going to be a police officer. He's going to break away from the mold, and he goes to train. And he's a very good police officer, and very quickly he's picked up by Scotland Yard, and he starts his career in London in the art world, I think it is. You see, they're very good books, but you do forget them afterwards. The characters stay with you, but it's interesting. But our brains aren't meant to hold all this information anyway, so it's fine. Um, and you meet his nemesis, which is I can't remember his name, but anyway, his nemesis is like the what's the nemesis called? In Moriarty's like the Moriarty of the books. You meet his wife, the woman he's going to marry. You meet his work colleagues, the work colleagues that are going to be with him through the books. In this one, there's stolen art. There's all kinds of different threads, actually. I found they're very different. Usually, you read something like this and it's one crime. With this, there's lots of bits of crimes that they're kind of weaving together. I recommend it. Again, it's one you can read in a day or two. Um, yeah, that's what I read in January. And so going forward, I mean, let me know what you read in January. Going forward, I'll still do these reading wrap-ups on here. I am not the type of person that deals with pressure. And I can't talk about pressure on my other channel and not pressurizing ourselves and then do it to myself. I'd be a hypocrite. Um, I'm all about flow at the minute, so yeah. Claire and the Classics as and when I've read one. The odd reading vlog, not the odd reading vlog, the odd bookish thing where we go out into a bookshop or like we're going to William Shakespeare Place, Stratford upon Avon. So we'll film that and put it on here. Um, if I read a book and I think, you know what, I'm going to do a singular review on this one, I'll do it. And anything else I feel called to. Like there's another one that's doing the rounds on BookTube at the minute where you go and read the 1-star reviews of your favourite books. So we'll do that as well. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please do like, comment, share, and subscribe. Let me know what you've read this month and what you plan to read next month. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.